Well, Silken Laumann was an already accomplished athlete, but became a legend after her inspirational comeback from a horrific boating accident to win bronze at the 1992 Barcelona Olympics. After years of public speaking, telling tales of triumph and perseverance, Silken realized there was part of her story that had never been told until now. Silken joins us to talk about her new memoir called Unsinkable, and it is a fantastic read. Everybody go pick it up. It is so inspiring, Silken.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the beginning, from where you start kind of in the book.
Well, I start with where people know me, which was 92, overcoming that accident 10 weeks before the Olympic Games. And I take people through the story of 92 and overcoming the accident, spending 3 weeks in the hospital, and then finding myself in the starting gates of that Olympic final, where I won a bronze medal. And then I take people back in time and in my life.
I mean, that in itself, when I knew about the accident. I think all Canadians knew about the accident and that you had to overcome significant odds to get to those Olympics. Yeah. But you go into it in significant detail. But then you talk about how you were public speaking and touring around Canada, inspiring people, but there was part of your story that you had never told, maybe not even to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I've always shared my life very openly, and my job has always been as a speaker to encourage and support other people. When I went through a divorce, I wrote an article for Chatelaine about the process of parenting. I was writing for Today's Parent. And as I started to unwind my life and understand, especially my childhood, and how it affected me as a person, how it affected the decisions that I made today, increasingly, when I was speaking, I thought, I have to share this story. And lots of friends who knew my story a little more intimately would say to me, you have a story here that would really help people, because a lot of people have had stuff in their life that they have to overcome.
But at a certain point, you felt like you had to write this. You couldn't contain it anymore. What was that tipping point for you?
You know, just it was a feeling of inauthenticity, really, like that I was up there inspiring people, telling people that they could achieve anything, but I wasn't necessarily sharing that backstory. And I knew in order to do that, that I was going to have to allow myself to be completely vulnerable, and that was going to be a huge decision.
And it's interesting that you use that word, because there's also a story that you talk about at the beginning where your coach, just before you rode in Barcelona, came up to you and said, I love you. And you seemed kind of taken aback by that intimacy and that vulnerability. When did you learn to incorporate that more in your life? Because I'm sure you were taught, well, growing up certainly, and then being an athlete competitively, that you weren't allowed to go there.
Yeah, I remember those words, and how they threw me at that time when I was 27 years old. And I think increasingly going through my experiences, especially as a kid growing up in a house where my mom had an undiagnosed mental illness, and my coping mechanism with her mercurial moods, never knowing what I was coming home to, whether she's going to be happy, whether she was going to be talking to herself, yelling, being accusatory and destructive to us. Like, I just never knew. And so I kind of hardened myself and became very self-defining and kind of wanting to separate myself from the family in a way.
And so that is your relationship with your mother, which you've incredibly sort of come to terms with, it seems, by the end of the book. Talk about her a little bit more, and then also your father's role in the family.
Yeah, so my mom is an incredibly vibrant, vivacious, artistic, intelligent woman, and she brought all that to the family and brought that to our lives, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. She was not healthy, and I think struggled so much for her own sense of peace and sense of self, and would go into these moments of desperation where she would actually talk about killing herself, talk about killing all of us in our sleep to sort of end the suffering, end her misery. And she wasn't well. But it was a very tough environment to grow up in. There was a lot of love, but all sorts of confusing messages too. I think never really sure of where you stood with her, and the emotional abuse could sometimes be incredibly intense. So we grew up in a house that also loved being physically active. My dad especially had this love of physical activity, and we had a lot of fun. We were outside all the time. My parents are German, and the idea that fresh air and exercise cures everything, so we were always active, and they really encouraged my love for sport, and certainly having that background helped me become the Olympic athlete that I am.
And, sort of this upbringing and all of these factors combined and manifested in you in certain ways. I mean, making you the athlete that you did become, but also anorexia, struggles with depression. At what point did you seek help and realize that it was okay to seek help?
Well, as a teenager, you have the hormones hitting you. There was this feeling inside me growing up in this house where so many things I didn't understand, that it was my fault. And I developed a real self-loathing and also a need for control, because so much in my life was out of control. And that anorexia is a disease of control a lot of the time. And that's how it manifested in me. When I was raising my children, who at the time were like 5 and 7, I really had one of those moments where I almost completely lost control with them. It felt overwhelming, the demands of being a mother, the needs of the children. I was separated from my husband, working full-time, raising these kids. And I suddenly thought, I can't cope, I can't do this. I don't have the tools. And I'm not going to become the parent I want to be unless I do something. And at that moment, I called a friend. And for the first time in my life, I said, help. I need help. I can't do this alone.
Well, this is, we're not even really truly gotten into it. Silken Laumann, Unsinkable. Please make sure you pick it up. And it goes on to talk about your incredible blended family now and how inspiring that is, and a whole bunch more. The book signing. You should make sure you hit it and pick up the book as well at Good Life Fitness, Richmond Square. It's today from 6 to 8, breakfasttelevision.ca. What an honor to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Silken.
Thank you.
We're going to check in with Jill again, hanging out at